British monarchs prior to Queen Elizabeth II. Complete list. There were several kings who ruled the United Kingdom before Queen Elizabeth II. However, Queen Elizabeth II, who has ruled the United Kingdom for the longest, appears to enjoy the greatest popularity. 11 monarchs, including 2 queens, had ruled the United Kingdom before Queen Elizabeth I. The news of Queen Elizabeth I's passing shocked the entire world into mourning. She was the longest reigning monarch since the dawn of modern history. The great king presided over the United Kingdom for over 70 years, during which time he appointed 15 British prime ministers, 12 American presidents, and all of Nigeria's presidents, both military and civilian. On Thursday, September 8, 2022, Buckingham Palace declared her demise. Buckingham Palace said in a statement, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." We take a look back at the rulers who came before Queen Elizabeth II, albeit before her coronation. This is the whole list. Queen Anne 1702 to 1714. At 37 years of age, Anne, daughter of James II, ascended the throne as the first British monarch. According to Britannica, she was born on February 6, 1665, in London. It was gathered that she became queen in March 1702, where she ruled until 1714 after her demise. King George I 1714 to 1727. Son of Sophia and the Elector of Hanover, great-grandson of James I. The 54-year-old George arrived in England able to speak only a few words of English with his 18 cooks and 2 mistresses in tow. George spent little time in England. He preferred his beloved Hanover, although he was implicated in the South Sea Bubble financial scandal of 1720. King George to 1727 to 1760. George was the last English king to lead his army into battle at Dettingen in 1743. King George III 1760 to 1820. He was the grandson of George II and the first English-born and English-speaking monarch since Queen Anne. George was well-meaning but suffered from a mental illness due to intermittent porphyria and eventually became blind and insane. His son ruled as Prince Regent after 1811 until George's death. King George for 1820 to 1830. Known as the first gentleman of Europe, he had a love of art and architecture, but his private life was a mess, to put it mildly. He married twice, once in 1785 to Mrs. Fitzherbert, secretly as she was a Catholic, and then in 1795 to Caroline of Brunswick. Mrs. Fitzherbert remained the love of his life. Caroline and George had one daughter, Charlotte, in 1796, but she died in 1817. King William IV 1830 to 1837. Known as the Sailor King for 10 years, the young Prince William, brother of George IV, served in the Royal Navy. He was the third son of George III. Before his accession, he lived with Mrs. Jordan, an actress, by whom he had 10 children. When Princess Charlotte died, he had to marry in order to secure succession. During his reign, Britain abolished slavery in the colonies in 1833. The Reform Act was passed in 1832. This extended the franchise to the middle classes on a basis of property qualifications. Queen Victoria 1837 to 1901. Victoria was the only child of Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg and Edward, Duke of Kent, the fourth son of George III. The Queen withdrew from public life after the death of Albert in 1861 until her Golden Jubilee in 1887. Her reign saw the British Empire double in size, and in 1876 the Queen became Empress of India, the jewel in the crown. When Victoria died in 1901, the British Empire and British world power had reached their highest point. She had 9 children, 40 grandchildren, and 37 great-grandchildren, scattered all over Europe. King Edward VII 1901–1910. A much-loved king, the opposite of his dour father. He loved horse racing, gambling, and women. This Edwardian age was one of elegance. Edward had all the social graces and many sporting interests, yachting and horse racing. His horse Minoru won the Derby in 1909. When Edward died in 1910, it is said that Queen Alexandra brought his current mistress Mrs. Keppel to his bedside to take her farewell. King George v. 1910 to 1936. George had not expected to be king, but when his elder brother died he became the heir apparent. He had joined the Navy as a cadet in 1877 and loved the sea. In 1893 he married Princess Mary of Teck, his dead brother's fiancée. His years on the throne were difficult. The First World War in 1914 to 1918 and the troubles in Ireland which lead to the creation of the Irish Free State were considerable problems. In 1932 he began the royal broadcasts on Christmas Day, and in 1935 he celebrated his Silver Jubilee. King Edward VIII, June 1936 to December 1936. Edward was the most popular Prince of Wales Britain has ever had. Consequently, when he renounced the throne to marry Mrs. Wallis Simpson, the country found it almost impossible to believe. The people as a whole knew nothing about Mrs. Simpson until early in December 1936. Mrs. Simpson was an American, a divorcee, and had two husbands still living. Edward abdicated in favor of his brother and took the title, Duke of Windsor. He went to live abroad. King George VI 1936 to 1952. George was a shy and nervous man with a very bad stutter, the exact opposite of his brother the Duke of Windsor, but he had inherited the steady virtues of his father George V. He was very popular and well loved by the British people. The Second World War started in 1939 and throughout the King and Queen set an example of courage and fortitude. They remained at Buckingham Palace for the duration of the war in spite of the bombing. Queen Elizabeth to 1952 to 2022. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, or Lilibet to close family, was born in London on April 21, 1926. Like her parents, Elizabeth was heavily involved in the war effort during the Second World War, serving in the women's branch of the British Army known as the Auxiliary Territorial Service, training as a driver and mechanic. She married her cousin Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and they had 4 children. Elizabeth's coronation in 1953 was the first to be televised, serving to increase popularity in the medium and doubling television license numbers in the UK. On September 9, 2015, Elizabeth became Britain's longest-serving monarch. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral on September 8, 2022 at the age of 96. She was the longest reigning monarch in the history of the United Kingdom, celebrating her Platinum Jubilee in June 2022.